Welcome to Teachers Transition Podcast, a show dedicated to supporting teachers transition in, through, and out of education. Grab your seat and let's talk about how to make your next transition a successful one. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning from. My name is Alex Curtin, and welcome to another special edition of Teachers Transition Podcast. If you were with us last time, you got to hear the very dynamic, very intelligent, multi-talented individual by the name of Kendal Askins, and our conversation was so impactful, I had to bring her back for a second episode. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Kendal Askins.
Hello, everyone. I'm
Please,
so happy to be here.
Awesome. You can remind us, about who you are, your family,
So, as Alex mentioned, my name is Kendal Askins. I am at heart truly an educator. I am a mom of 4. I am a CEO of my own company that I started. And I am currently, I work for the DaVinci Science Center, and I am the director of a partnership they have with a local school district. So I wear many hats, but it boils down to just me being an educator.
Awesome. And if you weren't listening to the episode, and if you were, she drops so many gems and nuggets. One of them, she knew from as a little girl that she wanted to be a teacher. So much, in fact, she would take her dolls, and they were her first students, and then she voluntold her sisters to be in the classroom as well. And I thought that was so impactful because, working with kids, kids kind of have visions of what they, want to be. And it doesn't start when you go to college. It starts in your mindset and believing who you are. So I thought that was very impactful. Another thing, as we were talking, I forgot, I didn't get a chance to mention it because she dropped so many gems and we kind of mentioned one gem, but one of the things she mentioned is going from being a teacher to an administrator. She actually had to trailblaze into an environment where there wasn't much diversity. And she became the first African-American administrator in that district. And I wanted to, give you kudos, and I wanted you to talk about that because sometimes we have to be the first, whether it's, because of our, whatever the situation, we have to be the first, whether it's a first female or the first African American or first this and that to trailblaze. Can you talk about what that was like for you?
Yeah. And before I say that, I want to just highlight something you just said. You just spoke about how I knew I wanted to be an educator since I was little. And so often, like with children, sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. What I've seen along my journey is children, if we pay attention to children, they often intuitively know what their purpose is. They might not know exactly what that might look like as a career, but they know what their purpose is. And so often as parents and educators, sometimes we have to be so mindful that we don't put that light out.
Yes.
I'll give you a perfect example. One of my sisters, so I'm the oldest of 4 girls, and one of my sisters, we laugh at this story all the time. When she was younger, like our parents used to ask us, what do you want to be when you grow up, and all of this. And she told my parents that she wanted to be, my mom specifically, she told her she wanted to be a house painter. And if you know anything about my family, we're a very educated family. We are pretty accomplished in things. And so that was not going to fly with my mom. She's like, a house painter, and even though we need house painters, right? We need people who are going to do certain types of work. And a lot of them are very skilled. You do have people that go on for, college degrees and are getting jobs that maybe require a different type of skill.
Yes.
And so for my mom, like a house painter just wasn't in the cards. And if you fast forward to now, my sister is about to graduate. She's currently an art teacher,
Okay.
and
Okay.
she's about to graduate in a year or so with her PhD in art therapy.
Wow.
And when you pause for a second and think back to the little girl who verbalized that she wanted to be a house painter, it wasn't necessarily that she was going to be a house painter, but in her spirit, she knew that that art, that creative piece was what she was here for. And so,
Yes.
what I want to encourage parents to do that are listening is when your children are expressing something to you, ask them a few more questions or even pour into them what's possible in that realm, right? So if you hear your child say that, for example, they want to be an athlete, right? We know that maybe making it professionally is very difficult. So
Yes.
you may encourage them, hey, you want to be an athlete, but do you know everything that's encompassed in that athletic world? They have doctors and they have, sports casters, and they have this and you have this.
Yes.
And so you could love the game and you could do all of these different things. Or if you're saying you want to paint houses like my sister, it's like,
Hmm.
hey, you could paint houses. You can own an art gallery. You can be an art teacher. You can do this. So it begins to open children up to, oh, wow, like I know that I want to do something in this world,
Yes.
right? Of like art, or me, it was education, even though, and I shared on the others, like I didn't exactly know what I wanted to teach, how, but me saying I wanted to be a teacher, it was acceptable, right? So that
Yes.
was kind of nurtured, where you might hear your children share something that you don't deem acceptable. Um, Open up their world to what's more. So I just wanted to say that before I answered the question that you asked me.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
So when I decided to go into administration, and I shared on the last, it was the position that I was put into. I did my best as a gifted support teacher, but that transition into that role made me go for my administrative license. And where I live, it is very uh, entrenched in tradition, and
Hmm.
this is just the way we've always done it.
Yes.
And usually, no outsiders
Hmm.
are able to penetrate this system. So
Yes.
people were super surprised that as a New Yorker, I was even able to come in and get a teaching job,
Mm.
because you had so many New Yorkers that had flooded where I live, and they were trying to transfer their jobs, especially like their teaching jobs and such, to this area, and they couldn't get in the door.
Wow.
And the reason they couldn't get in the door is because these schools here in this area, they hire like within. So when you talk to a teacher or an administrator, usually that is from this area, like when I go into those schools, these people have gone to school here. Their parents have gone to school here. They now live in the area. They work in the area.
Hmm.
They work with their spouses. Their spouses grew up in the area. And they just like, everything is very in like in-house, right?
Sure. Sure.
And so it is, so people were very surprised I was able to get a job, first of all, just as a teacher. And then when I got hired as an administrator, that was like, in the district that I got hired in, people were trying to figure out how did that happen. And to be honest, when I got hired as an assistant principal, the school that I walked into, I didn't know I was walking into this, but the person who had also applied for the job, who didn't get it, was a dean in that school, who
Uh-oh.
had been in the school for over 20 years
Mm-mm.
and was very close with the teachers.
I'm sure.
And they were furious
Sure.
that this outsider was coming in and got the job over their friend. So when I stepped foot into that district, based off my credentials and
Wow.
having earned that position and
Mhm.
having been the best candidate,
Yes.
I was walking in, for lack of a better word, to a hostile environment because they were angry that I got the job over their friend who
Wow.
they felt was um, qualified for the job, or who maybe they felt had earned her spot to have that
Yes.
job, right? And who was I to take away what she had earned? And there's a moment for me to pause there
Mhm.
because there's so much there for me to had unpacked, not just as a a person of color, right?
Sure.
But a
Sure.
woman
Hmm.
who has a young woman of color
Hmm.
who has often had to be twice as good to get half as much, if you've heard that saying. And
Absolutely.
to know that I literally was like the most qualified and those qualifications didn't matter
Mm.
because in other people's eyes, I had took something from someone. If I wasn't strong in who I was and my abilities, the imposter syndrome could have set in. Like, do I really
Absolutely.
deserve to be here? Because
Absolutely.
all of these people don't think that I deserve to be here. So, do I really deserve? And it's so important that when we do get into these positions, that we know that we've earned that and that
Yes.
we
Yes.
do deserve that because we've worked for it and nobody has given it to us.
Hmm.
It's such a powerful moment. It is
Yes.
such a powerful moment. And so that is something, if like as people are listening, I just really want them to know. And that was me coming in as an assistant principal.
Wow.
Um, so there
Well,
were, go ahead.
well, let's break that down a little bit because when you were mentioning that, you know, the first thing I want to ask you is, do you think that the superintendent or the administrative leaders wanted to change the culture of the district? Because sometimes they bring it in to make a change, especially when you're entrenched. So, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so it was so funny because so at the time, that school district had been led by someone for a very long time. The culture was really bad.
Mhm.
There was all type of legal things that had come, and that superintendent ended up having retired, left, whatever. And a new superintendent had come in and was restructuring and had
Mm,
opened up a number of positions
okay.
and had implemented, because up to that point, no true like interview process had been implemented. It was
Okay.
usually just like, oh, post a job. Okay, we'll just meet this one
Yes.
round and,
Hmm.
we'll hire who we need to
Mhm.
hire. And this new superintendent came from a different district, had was building his team and had implemented some new interview processes that included several rounds. I want to say I went through 3 or 4 rounds with multiple stakeholders. And so it was a real true vetted process.
Sure.
And they were attempting, yes, changing culture was part of the plan, but they were also attempting to make sure that the people that were getting into those seats were people that truly knew what they were doing.
Sure. Sure.
so so yes, to answer your question, but it wasn't just this idea that I got the job because like, oh, this person's going to disrupt the culture and bring
Yes.
something. I think it
Hmm.
was really off of the perspective and
Mm.
knowing that I knew what I was talking about. I knew my
Yes.
stuff, and truly I was the better candidate, for that particular position. There were a number of administrative positions that were hired when I got hired. I think it was 2 APs that got hired. So it was me and someone else. It was at least one principal position, and then there were some district level positions. So there were a number of administrative positions that were opened up,
Wow.
and that was part of it. And all of the positions got filled with people from outside of the district.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that sounds like a book for teachers and there's working in a hostile environment. And I'm going to come back to that, but I also want to address all of us as teachers that we have a responsibility to embrace new leadership. Because if the child is the center and focus of what we do, how sad it is for us to sabotage a new leader that's been brought in to affect change because that person might not fit the profile that we're used to. But I'll leave that alone. But going back to uh, your hostile environment, I wanted to ask you, at what point did you know it was in a hostile environment? Of course, looking back, I mean, were your spotty senses already tingling? Did somebody tell you? How did you navigate? You know,
Yeah. So, and remember, all this was an assistant principal. So, one of the very interesting pieces was after I got hired and approved, the superintendent called me,
okay,
and I had known him from a different, like, because this area that I lived is not that large.
okay,
So as you begin to know, like, you navigate and and you learn, and he had completely removed himself from the process
sure,
completely because
sure,
he wanted to make sure that if I was the best candidate, it was because I was the best candidate, not
of
because,
course,
I had knew who he was. So he called me and he said, "Hey, listen, I just want you to know that the person who actually was interviewing for the same position as you, um, this is the situation."
hmm
And that person was still guaranteed a position, but they were going back in the classroom. And what
hmm
was happening is they were going to be in the classroom in the building that I was like
hmm
being a part of overseeing. And he's like, "I want you to know this because of what may come with it." Now, it
yes,
ended up working out where that person wasn't in the classroom. They ended up finding an administrative spot for her and moved her
okay,
into that. And things ended up working themselves out
thank God,
with her, not with
yes.
the teachers were still angry though.
At least
Just
it's
because
one
it
person,
worked out for their friend, they were still
sure,
angry because they felt
sure,
that I had the spot that she was supposed to have. It was
hmm
interesting because with the principal that got hired, there was no hostility towards him
hmm
at all. And so that's something that I had to sit with, like, hmm, what is it? Because also in that building, I was the only African American,
okay,
period. And I was in a high leadership position.
sure,
So then I'm like, well, what is it that's actually the issue? Like,
sure, sure,
their friend got a job. I earned this. They see I do know what I'm doing. So why are we still, dealing with some different things? And I learned a lot because culturally, I will say the culture that I was in was a more passive aggressive
okay,
culture. I'm a very direct person. So that often conflicted
absolutely,
because I don't have to be saying something harshly to be saying something directly.
sure,
And when you deal with a culture that's used to not being direct, and you come in and you're being direct, or you come in and you're using data to dispel myths and
yes,
to hold people accountable and to say this is not acceptable,
sure,
or we're going to fight for all children despite
Yes.
opinions, you don't it doesn't always go over well. And that's not to say that everyone there was a problem, because there
Sure.
were phenomenal teachers that loved the fact that I was coming in and had some new ideas and things like that. But the ones that I did have to hold accountable really had a hard time. And it as assistant principal, I had brought in some new initiatives. My principal that I worked with was truly amazing. He allowed me to kind of run
Sure.
with some things, and he also was a great mentor in that he shared with me, hey, you might be right about this, but there's a better way to go about it, right?
Sure.
Or here's how you need to navigate this type of personality, right? Or you're very direct, Kendall, but you got to pay attention to who you have to switch it on and off with in what situations, right? Or
Yes.
this is not worth you getting upset about, and
Choose your battles. Yeah.
yeah, and how he taught me, like, hey, with parents, they might appear that they're really supportive of this, but the moment you do something that they don't like, you're
Hmm.
gonna watch them switch, be prepped for the switch.
Yes.
And just policies, procedures, he showed me that principals really have more control than we think. Like, I didn't think I could make certain types of decisions. And so he was a great person for me to learn under. And he really allowed me to grow. So through my assistant principal position, we developed, I noticed that the teachers were like super stressed out. And I pulled together a committee and we developed a mindfulness room for our
Okay.
educators. Some of them were very hesitant to use it because they felt like if they used it, it was saying like they couldn't handle their job or they weren't good at something.
Sure.
And so it was shifting their mind of that and getting them to take care of themselves. So we talked about that. We developed that. That was a shift. And I had one teacher even say to me a year after the mindfulness room was developed, the teacher came to me and she said, when you first started talking about this mindfulness, I was just like, oh, whatever. I thought you were crazy. She's
Sure.
like, and then I took this college course and they were talking about mindfulness and how you need to do this. She's like, and I said, oh, Kendall really does know what she's talking about. Like, she
Hmm.
said this to me, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I do know
Uh-huh. Yes.
something, right? And it was just, she wasn't being insulting.
Yeah.
But the fact that, like, she had to hear it from someone else
Yeah.
to be able to validate
Sure.
something that I was bringing was very telling to me, right?
Sure.
Is that, how I was being looked at or perceived despite knowing that I was knowing what I was talking about.
So
And
let
then
me
I would go
let
ahead.
me pause you right there. So knowing that, how did you deal with that emotionally? Because, you know, it's one thing to be a leader and you can't let them see them sweat, cry, but when you go home and unpacking all that stuff has effects. So can you talk about that? Because I think, you know, our future administrators, our teachers, gotta have that emotional IQ and have those things in place to navigate. Otherwise, you know, it's going to be
Yeah,
a hard
it
road.
is. So, it's so funny that you said, don't let them see you sweat. I almost feel a little bit of the opposite, right?
Okay,
And this is how I feel about it. I feel that one of the things that's most important to me is to show up authentically in all of the spaces and to
sure,
be honest.
sure.
And so I it doesn't mean that you have teachers believing like you don't know what you're doing, right?
Yes,
You might
yes.
have to sit back and for example, difficult times that we could talk about COVID because I can share what I did, how I led through COVID.
Okay.
Um, but when they are uncertain and that you know what you're talking about, there is a way to um, demonstrate that. There's also a way where if I was unsure or I wasn't sure how something was going to be, like I would say that,
Okay.
right? So what they knew of me they could say whatever they wanted about maybe my directness, about if they didn't like, let's say, a tone, if they didn't, even if they disagreed with my philosophy,
Mm.
because that was a big thing, is that I had a different philosophy of education and learning than many of them, not all of them, but many of them.
Sure.
We could have all of those conversations, but the biggest thing is that they knew they were going to get the truth from me, and they knew
Yeah.
that they were going to get honesty from me, right? And so they knew that if I was coming to them and I was saying, this is what we need to do, and this is going to work, and this is it,
Okay.
that I truly believed that, right? And
Gotcha.
then I was going to make that happen. Or if I said to them, this is how we're going to function, they knew I was going to follow through with whatever I said to them, whether they liked it or not. So
Yes.
I was not one where my words couldn't be trusted,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And so I think that that is so important. It's so important. Like my mom, my grandmother, they used to say, like, a good name is better than riches.
Mhm.
And people could say whatever they wanted about me, but emotionally, that's how I dealt with it. And so there were times where, yes, people would make me angry, or I would feel like, what did you just say? And if I felt so, with that one teacher who I knew it wasn't malicious,
Sure.
I kind of laughed, and then I just said to her, I do know something. I do know what I'm doing. And we laughed together, and it was
Sure.
fun, right?
Sure.
If I felt somebody was saying something that was violating a boundary or something, I would let them know. And I
Sure.
would let them know in a respectful way, but I would say, no, that's not what we're going to do. I have spoken to teachers, we're not going to treat children that way, right? This is not how we treat children, or myself, or whatever it is.
Sure.
And so I, as an administrator, was willing to have those tough conversations. And what that allowed me to do was to release those things differently.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
wasn't that I was holding on. I will tell you a story, and it deals with this.
Okay.
I, as a principal now, so all of that we've been talking up to is assistant principal, and I can go into how I transitioned into principal and even what that came with. But when I was a principal, there was one particular teacher that was really upset with me. And she was upset with me because, the long story short of it is, she had some different family situations, which, we understand. We all have, family situations. And um, the family situations were impacting the attendance.
Wow.
And
Okay.
it was like last minute things, right? So it'll be like she'd be in school all day and then all of a sudden have to leave at this point in time or
Sure.
whatever. And so we get it. We have those emergencies. But when those things become
Routine.
routine, I have to have tough conversations.
Yeah.
So I had to have a conversation to basically say, like, I really understand that all of these things are happening, but you do have a responsibility to be here, and we need to figure that out.
Sure.
So the teacher felt very upset that that conversation had to happen, and then just went on a rampage to kind of like
Mhm.
get other people to be against
Sure.
me. There were
Sure.
some other things I was dealing with that teacher as well. But it got so much, it was a murmur, but the murmur, she was able to get the murmur so loud that the superintendent, now this is a different superintendent. So since the one who I was hired under, within a very short time frame, we had two other ones. So the one I was hired under left, a new one was hired, and then he was let go, and then another one came.
Sure.
So I was under the leadership of, and there was an interim one, and then this one came. Under the leadership of this superintendent, and he thought it'd be a good idea to host something like a roundhouse where I would be there. He invited board members to come and opened it up to all of my staff, and allowed a space for them to just vent
Mm.
about how they felt about me,
Oh, wow.
which is a whole other conversation to unpack.
Yeah,
And I did not realize how strong I was. I think that was a terrible leadership decision.
sure.
Is not a way to show or protect your leaders.
Yeah.
But I took it, and there were only two people. There was a lot of people there, but there were only two people who said something really, it wasn't even a vent, it was just really mean, for
Sure.
lack of a better word. They just tried, like, what they had to say was clearly personal for them, and they
Okay.
used that platform to um just say mean things about my character, say things about just things that weren't even true, that their emotions had led them to say.
Sure.
And I was tasked with sitting there and allowing them to just say it. And I don't
Okay.
know any other administrator that has been put in a situation like that, where your staff can just say whatever
Sure.
they want in front of a crowd of people. And what happened is I sat there, I took it, and however I responded, I had so many people come up to me afterwards and later and say, we have such a different respect for you.
Wow.
That was not okay. People showed themselves, and the fact that you were able to sit there, be poised, take it, and still hold your head up is a big deal. And so, as upsetting as that was, right, emotionally it showed me how I have to handle people, right? Like,
Mm.
who's where, and it
Sure.
helped me understand my staff better, but it also opened people up. And so whenever I would experience tough situations like that, instead of thinking about it through the lens of something that was happening to me, I was looking through a lens of not only what I was learning, but how that lesson
Mhm.
was going to make me even better.
Okay.
Right. And so that experience taught me not only how people are,
Mhm.
right, and how people can be, but it showed me what kind of staff I had, how they were kind of split, and it was able to allow me to understand what ways I needed to move in order to make the changes that I knew needed to happen.
Wow. That's a powerful, hard thing to go through. Um, but, you know, thank goodness you're resilient. Thank goodness you can find, you know, the good and the lessons that you can take to make, yourself even a better leader, and also how to navigate the resources of people, teachers, and people in your building. So that brings us to, what are some of the things that you saw as a result of that, or how did you navigate, or what are some of the things at the end of the year that you said, okay, this helped me to take our staff from here to here? Of course, it's your leadership, but that transition moment, what are some of the lessons at the end of, you know, that journey?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is often when you hear people who are complaining,
Mhm.
um, the people that are complaining are usually a small group.
Yes.
They're a small group, but they make a lot of noise. And because they
Yes.
make so much noise, it often feels like they are a large group.
Mhm.
And uh, I think that was a huge lesson for me, because I sat in that cafeteria with a lot of people. It was definitely over 20 people in there. It might have been 40 people. I don't know, because the whole staff didn't come. Many of them had stated they didn't want any parts of anything like that.
Sure.
But there were still a significant number of people, and only two were the ones speaking. And so that was a huge lesson for me, because even when I would hear murmurs, or when I would hear language like everyone feels, right? This all encompassing language. I started to realize that everyone is not all, it might be one person or it might
Sure,
be
sure.
two people or five people. And what that allowed me to do, what God dropped in my spirit was like, you need to help those that are intimidated by that,
Hmm.
or who are not wanting to speak up, or those who are here because they want to do the same thing you're trying to do. Put your attention there.
Sure.
Put your attention on them. Help them find their voice. Encourage them to speak. Encourage them to share, encourage them to be the ones to speak up. And so, what I started doing, so as principal, when I got hired as principal, the principal left, he got a different job. I went up for the position. There was even politics around that. Um, I was given the position, not given, I earned it. I had to go
Yes.
through, I found out. So the person who saw the interim superintendent at the time, and I just told her this, I'll never forget her for opening this door for me. She she advocated for me to have the job, being the candidate that was the best for the position. And my own colleagues, um, some of them advocated against me getting it, the
Okay.
principal job, which was interesting,
Okay.
and uh, some others. And she advocated and said, this is what we're going to do because I do believe Kendal deserves the job. And so when she hired me, I'll never forget. It was her and one of the assistant superintendents, and it was a Saturday. And she messaged me and she said, "Hey, can we meet very quickly on this Zoom?" And we met, and she shared with me, you're the best one, you're qualified. And as she was talking, I'm thinking this is like a rejection speech, like she's
Sure.
just giving me courtesy, letting me know I didn't get it. And she shared with me all that people had to say about me,
Mm.
knowing, with her knowing that I was the most qualified for the job.
Wow.
And what she had done is created where she said to the board, I'm going to have her mentored, right? And we're going to make sure she's mentored and she's good, um, because she's the one that deserves this job. And again, that was another powerful moment. And I got very emotional because I knew because up until that point, I was acting as the principal. I was the
Yes.
interim principal. I had no assistant principal, and I was doing the
Wow.
job.
Wow.
And people had no problem. I was not getting extra pay, nothing.
Wow.
And they had no problem allowing that. But when it came to me actually getting the job, they wanted to question it. And she advocated for me, but had to put this stipulation. And it's no different than when I became assistant principal, right? If I wasn't confident that it was that like imposter syndrome that could step in and say, are you really ready for this job? Look,
Sure.
they have to mentor you. Where there were other people in district getting those positions that weren't having to go through that, right?
Sure. Sure.
And so that was it was a very big moment. But
Okay.
I will say what I ended up doing, one of the things I ended up doing as principal, I know we were talking about voice. I created mini professional learning meetings. And I was giving my teachers Act 48 hours. That's like hours that they have to earn to keep their certification.
Sure.
And so every 2 weeks, we were doing a math one. And on the opposite weeks, I was doing the ELA one. And I was bringing them together, and we were utilizing our data, the standards, and best teaching practices. And what I would do is I would maybe introduce an idea, and the lead teachers would run with that. And then when we would have those meetings, I would allow the teachers to take over.
Sure.
And what started happening is they started getting so excited that they started meeting on other days
Wow.
without me.
Okay.
And I was encouraging that because every 2 weeks we were meeting. So I was finding out what they were meeting about. And then what started happening is some of them started inviting me in, and I was encouraging them to observe each other or go to each other. And so I didn't have many believe that I would cover their class if they wanted to go observe each other or
Mm-hmm.
do whatever.
Yes.
And when they started asking and I started doing, it started to shift, and then they started seeing results.
Wow.
And so holding the line, doing that, we were able to see our math scores double in just 1 year,
Wow.
which is a big deal.
Yeah, it is.
And so when they saw that, and our ELA scores didn't double, but they had increased as well. And when they saw that, and they saw again that I actually know what I'm talking about,
Buy.
we
There was
shifted.
buy-in. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, it shifted. And what we started doing was creating systems
Mm-hmm.
that the teachers were buying into. So it wasn't just me. It was the fact that I was planting seeds and they were buying in. And so those systems could be, and because those systems were producing data that worked, those systems could be in place far beyond. So now we're talking legacy, right?
Sure.
And mindset change and shifting. And that's one of the reasons I got into administration, because I knew that as a classroom teacher, I could impact many students.
Sure.
But as an administrator, I could impact the teachers who would impact all of their students. So my impact would be exponential,
Yes.
because
Yes.
now I'm not just impacting the students that come in contact with me. I'm impacting the students that come in contact with all of the people that I influence. And so that was a major moment, a major moment. And my school, like we had gotten our building score because our test scores had gotten so high. We not only, so district schools get what's called a report card grade.
Sure.
A lot of people might not know about that, but it's a report card grade, and that report card grade goes into teachers' evaluations. It's a small percent, but it does go into their evaluations. The report card grade we had gotten from that year was not only the highest in the district,
Wow.
it beat out one of the top schools in our entire area.
Sure.
So from a very wealthy area, I think their score was like an 80 or something, and we had an 82.
Wow.
And so the year prior, we had like a 70 something. So we had, our score went up. And for our historic fourth grade, that historically was, their data was coming in red, which was below basic, like their fourth graders were coming in below basic for math.
Sure.
Our data moved to blue, which is the highest
Wow.
that you can get in math in 1 year from the systems that we had implemented and the teachers doing, what we said that they had to do.
Wow.
So it's a big deal. It's a big deal. I didn't think it was. I will say the same around that time. I'm gonna do a little shameless plug here. I had written a chapter in a book. So the book is called Systems Thinking for Instructional Designers,
Okay.
catalyzing organizational change. And I'll send you the title of that.
Okay.
And there's a chapter in there where myself and the principal at the time that I worked with, we wrote about the change that we implemented in the school. So what I'm sharing with you was what I did there as principal, but it started with some of the changes that we started to do when I was assistant principal. And we laid the foundational work, but then I held the feet to the fire for us to make
Yes.
that 1 year change.
Mm-hmm.
So as the instructional leaders that are listening, I want to say, don't be afraid to have high expectations. Sometimes we do need to rip the Band-Aid. You need to know your staff in order to do it. So again, I had 3 years of getting to know my staff before I said it's time to take the training wheels off, right?
Sure,
So
sure,
I knew them, but I also knew what they were capable of. And so I knew how I needed to handle them when they were going to have a hard time.
sure.
Um, and so that's important. So it's important that leaders know that you can't come in the first year and just change everything. You have to at least get to know your people, truly, 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 truly get to know them. But then once you know them and know like what they need to make it through difficulty, then you can have them do anything.
Awesome, awesome. I mean, wow. This has been such a comprehensive conversation. Um, and I want to close with, you know, the school year is starting here in Texas in a few days, in the Northeast in a month and a half, maybe shorter. Um, what other bits of encouragement or advice would you give, you know, that teacher that's going to the role to be an AP, or that AP is taking the helms to be the principal? I mean, you mentioned some great things, but any other final tidbits or words of encouragement for them for this school year?
I would say our work is a work of heart. It is not always, we don't get shown gratitude through money, and we don't always get shown gratitude even through words.
Yes.
People express gratitude based off of how we're making them feel in those moments. And so, what I would say is remember why you're there. I know it is very cliche of, educators get upset when they hear remember your why, but I will tell you that my why, which is the students and my strong belief in what learning should look like, is what kept me through those really difficult times. And knowing that I was seeing children getting not only what they deserve, but what's their right.
Yes.
Um, Despite people's opinions, right?
Mm,
Despite people's judgments, I was responsible for helping them get high quality education that
yes.
they deserved. And I
Yes.
was able to do it despite everything that I experienced with a smile on my face because I held my why in those tough times. And so it's okay that our job is thankless because that's not what we're doing it for. And so as you start the school year, as the kids get crazy,
Mhm.
as the parents and the teachers are losing it, I would say always spend some time reflecting on your why and also remembering that tomorrow is always another day. So you don't have to bring yesterday into the next day. You can release it and show up again. So um, you're going to have good days and you're going to have terrible days. And
Mhm.
it's okay. It's okay.
Yes.
It's all part of the cycle. But at the end, it is worth it.
Wow. Such valuable and wise words, and uh, we spend our time encouraging parents. So this podcast is now reaching parents. Now we encourage and help teachers and administrators, and we're definitely going to have a third conversation because every teacher, not most teachers have a side business, and you have a very successful one, as well as your role, as you mentioned, with uh, uh, the partnership, DaVinci Science
Science
Center, and
center, yes.
we're looking forward to having part three. So, ladies and gentlemen, you need to stay tuned to hear part three because there's so many more gems to drop. And I appreciate your time today, Miss Kendall.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
And thanks for joining us today. Please like, subscribe, and share this episode with a colleague. Keep learning, keep growing, and never stop believing in your impact because you truly make a difference.